Welcome to meeting number 26 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations Estimates, of course widely known as the mighty OGGO. We welcome back Minister Lightbound and our regular officials from PSPC for the first hour. Then we'll take a quick break and then welcome Mr. Fuhr and Mr. Guzman. Mr. Lightbound, I assume you have Minister Lightbound, I assume you have an opening statement?
Oui, Monsieur le Président, j'ai des remarques d'ouverture.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have opening remarks. So thank you for welcoming me to OGGO. It's a pleasure to be back to speak to Bill C-15, the Budget Implementation Act. Budget 2025 addresses a time of profound change for Canada as the world undergoes a series of fundamental shifts. We are rethinking our supply chains and our priorities. Our priorities are changing quickly to respond to economic and security concerns. The world is more unstable and more dangerous. Canada must not stay on the sidelines. We must build a stronger, more resilient economy for the benefit of all Canadians.
Budget, modernizing government, supporting Canadian workers and businesses, and making strategic investments that will shape our future prosperity. Building a strong, sovereign Canada by spending less to invest more in the people who are building this great country. Public Services and Procurement Canada plays a central role in this effort. As the government's common service provider, we touch nearly every aspect of federal operations, from the buildings Canadians rely on, to the technology systems that deliver services, to using the powerful lever of public procurement, leveraging billions in public dollars to scale up our strategic economic industries through our new Buy Canadian policy. Budget 2025 is going to enable PSPC to drive this transformation. Most importantly, we are making ourselves our own best customer through our Buy Canadian policy. Canadians expect this of us, to prioritize spending to build our domestic manufacturing and innovative businesses, strengthen our supply chains, and create good, well-paying jobs for Canadians. This scales up our strategic industries, builds capacity at home, and makes us more competitive internationally. This will in turn open new trade opportunities and diversify our trade relationships. Dans le domaine des achats de la défense, la création de l'agence
procurement, the Defense Procurement Agency is already contributing to moving projects forward more efficiently so that the Canadian Armed Forces receive the equipment they need more quickly. And we are strengthening industrial process in the country. We are modernizing IT systems in the government, and we are broadening the use of AI responsibly to better deliver services, to reduce costs and administrative burden. Bill C-15 also has important amendments to the Canada Post Corporation Act, which reflects this broader modernization plan. It's no secret that Canada Post has major financial problems and is going through an essential transformation time. It is essential that we ensure that the corporation has the revenue it needs to continue operating, to make the necessary investments to continue serving Canadians across the country. A major obstacle is the approval process that is long and rigid for postage rates, the price of a stamp. It requires governor and council approval. This adds bureaucracy and limits Canada Post's capacity to respond to economic changes.
This process, allowing Canada Post to set postage rates while maintaining appropriate oversight and accountability. These changes follow the recommendations of the Industrial Inquiry Commission led by Commissioner William Kaplan, and they are aimed at supporting the long-term financial sustainability of Canada Post. I want, however, to be absolutely clear that these administrative changes do not alter long-standing public service commitments. Free postage for materials used by people who are blind will continue, as it has for more than a century, and reduced postal rates for libraries will remain in place. These important services are not being affected in any way, shape, or form by Bill C-15. In closing, Mr. Chair, Budget 2025 reflects a government that understands the need to adapt and lead in a changing world by modernizing government operations, reducing red tape, and making smart generational investments. We're strengthening Canada's economy and ensuring public institutions remain strong, efficient, and responsive to Canadians. Le projet de loi C15, Monsieur le Président, est essentiel
Bill
pour mettre
C-15 is essential to implement our ambitious necessary plan, and I am pleased to discuss it with colleagues here today.
Thank you very much. Start with Mrs. Block, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister Lightbound, Ms. Reza, and Mr. Urechi for coming and joining us today to talk about the amendments to the Canada Post Corporation Act, among other things, because we do have some other questions for you today. I know that you were here in November, at which time Canada Post and PSPC yourselves were in conversations around another loan for Canada Post. At the time, you couldn't tell us very much because you were still in conversations. We understood that they were not in supplementary B estimates, which we were looking at them because the conversations were ongoing. But earlier, I think late last week, it was announced that a decision had been made to approve another loan to Canada Post. How will this funding be authorized?
Oui, ben le financement dont fait état, puis peut-être Lorenzo, si tu veux.
The financing, and Lorenzo, if you want to complement my answer, but a little bit over $1 billion was granted. It's a refundable loan to Canada Post that would allow Canada Post to continue its services, its essential services that Canadians need. Now, it's important to highlight that when we made the announcement in September to modernize and transform Canada Post, it was in recognition of the fact that though we have to support Canada Post as it's facing financial difficulties, it needs to transform itself because this cannot be a long-term solution for the federal government to support it in such a significant way. Lorenzo, I don't know if you'd like to add something there. Thank you, Minister.
So earlier last week, an order in council was posted that indicates that the Minister of Finance had authorized additional funding for Canada Post. This is required under the Canada Post Corporation Act, but the funding will be included in Supplementary Estimates C as part of the annual process. Thank you.
So it is another loan, like the previous $1 billion loan. Are the terms similar for this loan as the previous $1 billion loan?
Je veux le prendre, Lorenzo, mais oui. Oui.
Yes.
Will Canadians ever get repaid for the first $1 billion that you approved for Canada Post?
C'est certainement ma volonté
It
la
is
plus chère.
certainly what I most hoped for. When I was appointed minister responsible for Canada Post, I didn't take long to act on the recommendations from Commissioner Kaplan and to ask Canada Post for a plan. This is a corporation that was profitable for a long time, but because of changes I've explained in the past, hasn't been for a good 7 years. It's essential that it finds financial viability once again, and that's certainly my will, that Canada Post would one day be able to generate profits, but also ensure its indispensable mission for Canada. It's a vital institution for the fabric of our nation. I'll stop there. I see you have another question.
It is my understanding that you gave Canada Post 45 days to submit a plan to right-size their operations. So that was 3 months ago that you received that report, 3 months ago, and you have yet to make any sort of announcements about whether or not that's been approved. And I just want to quote from the Auditor General's report of February 9th, 2026, where she states, our latest commentary draws attention to significant, I'm on the wrong paragraph. Also, in our 2025 commentary, we noted that 77% of Crown corporations did not have their corporate plans approved before the start of their fiscal year. This is similar to the rate reported in the 2024 commentary. She also goes on to note delayed approvals can cause operational inefficiencies, project delays, or additional costs. So when we look at the fact that Canada Post provided you with the plan that you required them to give to you 3 months ago, When are you going to make a decision on that plan?
Ben, premièrement, c'est juste qu'on a reçu.
First, we received from Canada Post a transformation plan in November. We've had discussions with Canada Post to receive more information to ensure we have all of the information. That being said, it's clear that when I made the announcement in September, we had lifted the moratoriums on community mailboxes, rural mailboxes. I expect Canada Post to consult communities that will be impacted and start preparing that transformation. That's the message I sent to Canada Post that I'm sending once again today. And that's what Canada Post is working on, to my understanding.
So we know that for between 2019 and 2024, PSPC did not approve Canada Post strategic plan. So for 5 years, their strategic plan was not approved. We now find ourselves in a situation where in September, you provided some, I guess, I'll end it there and I'll come back to that. Thank you.
Thanks. Madame Rochefort.
Oui. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre et l'équipe.
Good afternoon, Minister and team.
In your opening remarks, that these changes are administrative in nature. Can you explain the current process for setting stamp rates and how, to some extent, it creates red tape? And especially given that in the this week we've been discussing the Red Tape Reduction Act, and so I'd be interested in your comments on that. And also, how much do you expect the timeline to be expedited by giving Canada Post authority to set postage rates independently? And I think you might have touched on that, but if you could just confirm it once more.
Oui, ben merci beaucoup pour la question. Puis, en
Thank you
effet,
very much for the question. That is part of an effort. It's part of the transformation we want to see of Canada Post, but it's part of a broader agenda to reduce bureaucracy and red tape. Specifically with Canada Post, it was one of the recommendations of Commissioner Kaplan, which was supported by the union, or the unions, so that Canada Post has the means to increase, to follow inflation, the cost of delivery as well, the price of stamps. And now, to answer your question, Madame Rochefort, the process is that it will be gazetted. It will go through the Governor and Council. So it can take 3 to 4 months, which is pretty long and laborious. And it starts at the wrong spot. Politically, now it would be Canada Post that would say, based on our operations, here's the increase we propose. It would be in their corporate plan and then approved by Treasury Board. But that process will be much quicker, and it will start in the right place at Canada Post. To give you an idea, 2018 to 2023, there was a 7% increase in the price of stamps in the country. In other jurisdictions that are comparable, it went up about 55%. So that flexibility there and that agility to follow inflation with the price of stamps, that's what we're seeking to change and improve with Canada Post. But with accountability as well, in 2 ways. One is that it will be in their corporate plan. It will be approved by Treasury Board. And also, as Minister, every year I send a letter setting out expectations or intentions with Canada Post to inform them of our priorities. And in that letter, I can instruct them, here's what we're expecting for the price of stamps. Thank you very much.
The matter of maintaining preferential rates and exemptions for libraries and Canadians who are blind. I would just like you to repeat it. In my writing, the issue of libraries has come back, and so just to say it once more, loud and clear, would be very helpful.
Et merci de le soulever. Puis je suis vraiment heureux
Thank you
d'avoir
for raising this. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity here to really clarify the matter once and for all, because this has generated a lot of legitimate fear, because this is a program that many libraries depend on across the country. There are no changes that will affect the price of stamps for libraries or blind people. The program is staying in place. That preferential rate for libraries has existed since 1939, with or without legislative protection, and it will continue to exist with these changes. There are no changes. we understand the importance of this program for libraries, especially in smaller communities. It gives access to a greater network of libraries where, in a way that makes financial sense. So no changes, and no changes for blind people either. I want to be absolutely clear. Canada Post was clear. We spoke about this, and with blind people, I know it wasn't part of your question, but as I have the floor, Canada has signed an international convention. I don't have the exact name with me. Maybe Lorenzo has it. But in any case, an international convention, I'll find the name a little later. But we've signed that convention, and the protection offered to blind people when it comes to the materials they need in Braille, it has existed since 1888, over 100 years, before there was any legislative protection, and it will continue existing because this is a public policy we feel is important. Canada Post as well, and there will be no changes. I want to reassure your constituents and all Canadians.
Related to small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in rural and remote communities. I was surprised to learn that they remit annually over $350 million per year in prepaid postage through postage meters. And I learned that metered mail is cheaper to process, improves address accuracy, and helps retain stable, high-volume users in the postal network. And so can you explain how giving Canada Post greater flexibility to design targeted pricing, such as for metered mail, helps retain mail volumes, support rural, small and medium-sized businesses, and protect the long-term viability of Canada Post?
Excellente question. Juste pour revenir sur la
Excellent
présente,
question. It's the Universal Postal Convention. And so the protection for blind people is since 1898. So that's been there for quite some time, and it's there to stay. Regarding your most recent question, the opportunity for Canada Post to determine the price of stamps based on market needs and volume, and to have some predictability for their clients is essential to ensure there's the right volume and that they have the demand they wish. So I think that will help. And it's not for nothing. It was one of the recommendations from Commissioner Kaplan. In a number of regards, it improves things. At Canada Post, there was a lack of predictability for their clients.
Please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome once again. I have a number of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but I'm delighted to hear because I've also heard many concerns about libraries, so I hope there will be correspondence rapidly from municipalities. Nobody listens to us, or very few people tune in, so this is news we will need to share. So I salute all those in municipalities who raise this with me. So in the news, there are contracts of contracted delivery. I know the CEO will meet with the Transport Committee tomorrow, will appear there. There are two elements. Cost reduction, but at what price? And are you aware of who is being hired at a time when there are deaths on the road currently? That's a very good question. You won't be surprised to hear that I've taken note of those articles as well, and the Canada Post CEO will appear at Transport tomorrow. But from my perspective, I'm not responsible for Canada Post operations, but I'm the minister responsible. I expect from that Crown Corporation, like all Crown Corporations, that they have the highest standards of integrity, quality, and safety with their suppliers. What Canada Post has told us is that they haven't used contractors that would be in like that Drivers Inc. model. The CEO will be able to appear tomorrow with all of the information, but what I've been told is that they haven't used that type of company. My expectation is that they don't deal with that type of company, and with the Budget Implementation Act, $67 million over 4 years will provide them with the tools and the means to fight that type of company, to identify them, so they can be strict with those who need to be punished. Mr. Chair, at the last meeting we had, I was vigilant about the possible privatization, and I was looking at the German model, and so that's one of my concerns. But subcontracting is at a lesser cost, and that's an issue that concerns me. But now let's turn to the restructuring plan. How is it that the CEO and the department don't have the plan yet? There's been all this time. Is there a dichotomy in strategy and intentions? I expected to have news. People are concerned. They wonder if their post office will close. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell us when we will have the news. As I mentioned, we received the plan in November at the time. Maybe it was you or someone else, but when I announced the changes at Canada Post, I was told we were going too quickly, and now we're telling me we're taking too long. I think the idea is to find a balance. But in that regard, we received Canada Post's plan. We discussed a lot with them to obtain more information to ensure it's a good plan, because when I announced in September that we were going to transform Canada Post, and I know we agree on this, there are fundamental principles that need to be respected, including that there be services in remote Indigenous communities. This is essential for me, so I want us to land at the right place with Canada Post. There's work that needs to be done by Canada Post for community mailboxes, for example, to start consultations with communities that will be affected. How can that be operationalized? But in the area of transformation, I'd be happy to come back and talk about it more at the right time. It's not because there wasn't a public announcement that no work has been done. There's a lot of work being done with Canada Post to obtain all of the information so we land at the right place. Okay, I have 1 minute left. All right, sandboxes. We met with the office last week for red tape reduction. I have two concerns. The first is conflicts of interest, because there's a structure. How can I state this correctly? So you could be set aside from the ethics commissioner, but in the choices we make, we're told there's no specific practice to ensure that when we make ministerial choices, there's no conflict of interest. So what about having that guardrail? How long do I have, Mr. Chair? 30 seconds. I'm also keeping track of time. 30 seconds. It's a good question regarding the sandbox. I think on the principle, what Bill C-15 seeks to do, Budget 2025 more broadly, is to have a regulatory framework to accelerate innovation, and the sandbox principle is used throughout the world. The European Union has them, and the United Kingdom in the financial sector since 2016, they've had sandboxes like this, regulatory sandboxes, and 700 firms have innovated, improved. There have been billions of dollars in spin-off benefits. And we need more flexibility. Now, if there are suggestions regarding proper guardrails and supervision mechanisms, we're open to hearing them.
Généreux.
You're generous. Thank you.
Thank you. So being here, it's great to be able to have an opportunity to ask the minister in regards to red tape reduction. I'm very excited, especially I think in the current situation that we find ourselves, where we are going through the worst bankruptcy rates since the last financial crisis. And actually in BC, bankruptcies are up at 10%. And when I meet small and medium-sized business, I hear things like this. You know, there's too much paperwork, there's slow approvals, there's high compliance costs. They can't afford, and they can't even afford the payroll and rent. So what I'm wondering is if you could explain to me how giving this new exemption, these sandbox exemptions, would make life easier for small and medium-sized businesses.
Oui, ben, d'abord, il faut regarder l'effort de
We need
réduction.
to look at the red tape reduction effort as a whole. If I look at our department,
I'm just hoping we can hear this new exemption. Does it automatically simplify forms for small and medium-sized businesses? I understand it does for big, but how about for small and medium?
Mais c'est parce que vous prenez une mesure dans
you're
le
taking
budget.
one measure from the budget, but there are many others. The effort to reduce paperwork is not limited to the sandbox.
One, and so because we see this tragedy happening with bankruptcies, would it automatically shorten approval times for small and medium-sized businesses? I get it that it does it for some of these big guys, but for small and
Mais pas
medium-sized.
seulement, écoutez, moi, ce qu'on
Not
vise,
only, look, what we're trying to do with this is increase the speed of innovation, where sometimes the regulatory framework stalls innovation. One example, it could, depending on the sector. I don't know if it will help my barber, but it could help a small fintech company that wants to accelerate payment systems using digital assets like stablecoin or other.
Is it easier for a larger organization with a legal team to use than it would be for a small, like you say, a startup? Would you require a legal team?
non, ma compréhension, c'est que non, ça peut très bien aider des petites
Our intention is that small startups could innovate, and that's what we've seen in countries that have that type of instrument, regulatory frameworks.
Ben,
Small and
c'est-
medium-sized, the kinds that I have, like 10% of bankruptcy in British Columbia. Will it apply to them?
ben, c'est-à-dire que le principe dont on parle,
The
les
principle
bacs
we're
à-
talking about, the regulatory sandboxes, if you look at Germany, France, the UK, where it's done, the EU, Brazil, it's not necessarily for one specific sector. It's not for one broad sector. It's sectors where the regulatory framework stalls innovation.
Small and
Ben, je
medium-sized
pense que oui,
businesses.
la réponse c'est oui, ça peut
I think so.
certainement
The
être-
answer is yes. It can certainly help SMEs.
I understand, and I could be wrong, that the only concrete red tape measure in the BIA, red tape reduction measure, is the creation of these exemptions for these big businesses. There's no other one, just that one. The rest is going to be sometime in the future in another budget. We just get this one. When we see bankruptcies at such high levels right now, when we need, small businesses really need some relief, and all we see is just this one, this fancy exemption for big, elite, large companies that are going to be doing who knows what.
Non, pas du tout. Quand on regarde, par
No,
exemple,
not at
les-
all. When we look at SHRED, the tax credits for scientific research and experimental development, I can tell you, you can come to Quebec and see how many SMEs are benefiting from those tax credits. We're simplifying, drastically simplifying.
These fancy exemptions that they put in place.
mais c'est pas le seul. Je veux dire, vous prenez
It's
un
not the only
élément.
one. You're taking one element of a big bill.
This brand spanking
regardez,
new one.
regardez les changements
Yes,
qu'on
but
fait.
look at the changes we're making to these tax credits to simplify them for entrepreneurs. And this is the feedback we've received from the Council of Canadian Innovators. They're telling us that we need to change how those tax credits are given to give predictability to businesses and increase the cap.
On le fixe.
Yes, we are fixing it. Yes, yes.
What my concern is these very small companies who really don't have the opportunity to, they don't have legal teams, they don't have all these extra people. You know, a lot of these things that you guys have put forward is productivity that is going to get fixed 15 years from now, right? Like big projects. And I think the fastest way to actually make an impact on our GDP, on our productivity, is exemptions for small and medium-sized businesses so that they can hire tomorrow, not in who knows how many years. It's the middle-class entrepreneur, the small and medium-sized business owner who can make a decision tomorrow to hire someone. And a lot of these things that you're putting forward have nothing to do with these small and medium-sized businesses, like the corner coffee shop. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Gasparo, sorry. We're past our time, but it's Mr. Gasparo's round, so if he's kind enough, he may allow some of his time for you to respond, Minister Lightbound, but I'm not sure Mr. Gasparo is, but the time's yours, sir.
Great, thanks. And you'd be correct. Minister, yeah, thank you. So I want to come back to a line of questioning my colleague had referenced, and it was in regards to the Universal Postal Convention. You mentioned in your statement that the preferential rates for libraries have been in place since 1939. There's no plan to change them. You mentioned the no rate postage for individuals who are blind, and that's been in place since 1898. So is that statutory in nature, or is it through the convention of the Universal Postal Convention that we are maintaining that public policy position?
Par rapport aux personnes aveugles,
Regarding blind people, it's an obligation Canada has under the Universal Postal Convention. As I was explaining, we signed it in 1898. Not necessarily statutory, but it's an obligation we have under a treaty we've been a part of for over 100 years. Regarding libraries, it's statutory, and it has been since 2013. There was a private member's bill that enshrined in law the preferential rate for libraries. Before 2013, libraries, since 1939, they've had that preferential rate from Canada Post to share material between libraries. And even though we're making this change to provide more flexibility to Canada Post to set the price of stamps, it doesn't change anything to these public policies that were there before 2013, since 1939. They will remain. For members, for example, Canadian citizens can send letters and communicate with their representatives free of charge. There's no legislative protection that enshrines that in law, that it's free of charge to write to members of parliament. It's a public policy that's been in place for decades that will remain in place, even though there's not, strictly speaking, statutory protection. I want to be very clear. Those preferential rates have existed for decades, or for MPs, it's free of charge, and it will remain even after the adoption of the Budget Implementation Act.
And there are lobbyists who are calling for domestic statutory protection. It would, I guess, from your perspective, would be redundant because of us signing on to this international obligation and the fact that it's basically been enshrined for decades.
Et tout à fait. Et l'enjeu qu'on a,
Exactly, and the issue we have is that when it becomes enshrined in law, it's linked to the process we have that I explained in a previous response, where it had to go through the Governor and Council, be gazetted, and that slow speed that we're trying to eliminate by providing more flexibility to Canada Post. But that flexibility to set the price of stamps doesn't involve any changes to public policies that have governed it for decades. Canada is obligated under the Universal Postal Convention. So for libraries and for blind people, I can't say it enough times. And we've had a lot of communication fairly on this, because this is a service that is essential for many Canadians across the country. And with libraries, it gives access to a broad network for smaller libraries and smaller communities at lesser cost, and blind people can have materials in Braille, which can be rather expensive. So it's very important, and there's nothing that will change with the proposed changes.
Okay. Quickly, have any other stakeholder groups called for changes to the stamp rate process? I know you touched on this a little earlier, but I know obviously the commissioner has, but just remind me again, has anyone else called for this?
La société elle-même le demande depuis un bon moment d'avoir cette.
Canada Post has asked for that flexibility itself for some time. The unions have called for that flexibility because it's essential revenue for Canada Post if we want to reach financial stability, profitability, or break even for Canada Post. It's one of the points in Commissioner Kaplan's report. The union and Canada Post agree on this, so it's essential that we go forward with this measure. And I'd highlight in passing that there have been positive developments since the last time I appeared before committee. The union and Canada Post have agreed they need to ratify the agreement, but the two parties hadn't found common ground for a long time. That's very positive, and that leads to predictability and stability at Canada Post, which was lacking and accelerated the loss of business.
Je vais revenir sur un
I'll
autre.
come back on another gray area. I appreciate you being open to our suggestions, Minister. So, yeah, there's a song I'm thinking of right now. So the gray area is, in terms of the criteria, the main criterion for the regulatory sandboxes is it has to be in the public interest. The question's been asked, what is the definition of public interest? Because that could be qualitative, and there is none. So this could be a concern. The minister can decide alone of the content of the regulatory sandbox, and in terms of independence and control, and it will last for 3 years. What can be done now and not in 3 years say we should have done this? So what of the guardrails? In the public interest, there are sectors. We want to foster innovation in key sectors. You could think of the financial sector could benefit, advanced manufacturing, clean energy. There are good use cases, good examples that could benefit from sandboxes, as we've seen in other countries. Now, regarding guardrails, we need to know that there's a lot of transparency in what's been proposed. There are reports, it goes to Treasury Board, it's published. So it's not opaque. Everything that comes from these sandboxes would be perfectly transparent, and the public could ask questions and see what's happening. So there's transparency there. It's about accelerating innovation. The world is evolving very quickly, and an example that comes to mind that we see elsewhere in the world is that now the finance world is evolving very quickly with new technology, new payment methods, digital assets. The regulatory framework doesn't always allow for innovation. We want to have innovative small businesses testing out new approaches without necessarily needing to invest a lot in regulation before they know if it's a good approach. So this is for my colleagues from all parties as well, Liberals, Conservatives, Bloc, the NDP isn't here, but if you have suggestions to ensure we have the right balance, we're open to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Minister, can you give us some concrete examples of what you have done to address the concerns you highlighted in your opening statement about we living in a dangerous world, which is true? Tell us about one project that has been started and that actually had a positive impact on Canadians outside of the Ottawa bubble.
Ben, très facilement, dans le budget 2025.
In budget 2025, there's $5 billion for commercial corridors to increase our capacity to diversify markets, to export to new markets. And in that regard, shortly after the budget, I was there in Saguenay for the second dock to allow the Port of Saguenay to have greater capacity to deal with the materials from the area and further so they can be more competitive, more productive, and it's a boom for the area.
From?
100%. 100%.
Exactly this budget that you...
100%. 100%. $5 billion for commercial corridors. And I can give you, as an example, I don't have an announcement yet, but I hope that the Port of Quebec City will benefit, as well as a lot of other port and airport infrastructure, maybe in your part of the country as well. That's a very concrete example.
The Gordie Howe Bridge, that is in my jurisdiction, is currently being threatened by the President of the U.S. I'm not sure what your government is going to do about that, but I'm very disappointed in the lack of negotiations that you have not done to open that bridge. It's been delayed and delayed and delayed. When is that delay going to end? When is that bridge going to open?
I think I've understood regarding that bridge that the Prime Minister has had a conversation with the President this morning and that the issue will be resolved as quickly as possible in a context that's not always easy, as you know, right now.
People in Windsor are looking for a date. They want toll rates. When is that going to be published? Because I've reached out to your department and the transportation sector, and nobody has responded to my emails about those questions. I'm sorry I'm getting loud here, but these are frustrating things for the people of Windsor, and they're not getting the answers they deserve. Why is there a delay? Last year, we were told that the bridge was going to open in the fall of 2025, and now it's early 2026. And yesterday, we heard the comments made by the U.S. President that he's not going to allow it to open. And now you're telling me that the Prime Minister had a conversation. Tell us, give us some concrete timelines as to when this bridge is going to open. Just conversations are not enough. I'm sorry.
Et crier en comité non plus n'est pas suffisant.
Yelling at committee is not enough either, Mr. Gill. It's not an issue that is under my department. That would be the infrastructure department. I'm sure the minister will be pleased to speak to you so you can have all of the information to inform your constituents.
You, sir. My apologies on that part. But as you can imagine, the people of Windsor are very frustrated. They've been told that this bridge is coming and it's going to open soon. And I'm sure part of this procurement process is under your purview. So there has to be some sort of answers that I can bring to the people of Windsor from you and your government to say, this is the exact timeline that we are seeing, and this is when the bridge is going to open.
J'apprécie votre question, puis je
I
comprends
appreciate your question. I understand the frustration when there are projects that take longer than planned. It happens with infrastructure that takes longer than expected. I'd like to answer, but I don't have the information. This is not an issue that's under my portfolio. That's from infrastructure. It'll be my pleasure to put you in touch. But when you talked about direct impacts, you were talking about, I can tell you, in the Ile de la Madeleine, there's a landing strip, and those $5 billion, you can talk to any port authority across the country, and they'll tell you that there are major needs for infrastructure. And we are seeking to diversify at unprecedented rates. And I think Canadians understand that it's necessary right now.
That's why I brought up, because you mentioned the infrastructure projects that you have initiated and completed, this project in my city is not being completed. And that's why I brought it up to you, not for any other reason. All right, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Sutz, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister and team, for being with us here today. First, I'd like to pick up on the line of questioning from MP Jansen. We were at that point talking about what she referred to as fancy exemptions in respect to Canada Post, and asking whether there were any other fancy exemptions that would help small and medium-sized businesses within Bill C-15. In my riding, businesses are talking about a lot of the supports that are in the budget that will help them. whether it's the small, medium-size Office of Procurement that is going to be set up under the Buy Canadian policy, whether that is improving and speeding up on the SR&ED credits, or whether that's the super productivity deduction. So I'm wondering, Minister, if you could speak to some of the examples that you've seen in the budget similar to the efforts that we're taking with Canada Post that will help small and medium-sized businesses.
Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Suds, for the question. Much appreciated, because you've reminded me of something I forgot in my answer earlier. It's true. In our announcement for Buy Canadian, we're really changing the way we do procurement to prioritize Canadian companies and Canadian content. There's a part that's important. The program that's funded in the budget to facilitate access for SMEs to federal procurement, and that's very important. Sometimes it can seem complex to deal with the Government of Canada. We want to simplify the process. We want to give more contracts to SMEs. We want the products of our small businesses to be purchased by different departments, different crown corporations, because often a Government of Canada contract is the best business card for a company as it's trying to expand internationally. I'm very pleased that's coming in the spring. It's funded by the budget. And you also talked about tax credits for scientific research and experimental development. I've heard from many entrepreneurs around me, and you too, I'm sure, because you have a writing that's very innovative. They say the process as it was lacked predictability. It needs to be reviewed. We need to know how much we can invest and what we'd receive, and have that uncertainty upstream. That's what Budget 2025 is doing. It's providing approval to an investment upstream rather than having it after the fact. And an increase of 35%. And capital cost allowance, 100%. There are many entrepreneurs who are awaiting that. And in my preparation, I looked at reactions we've had to the budget, and for manufacturers and exporters of Quebec, they say they are satisfied to see how important manufacturing is in the budget. We feel that the government wants to prioritize our businesses for our economy and for national security. The measures in the budget meet the priorities of our members: access to contracts and investments for innovation. That's Julie White. From the manufacturers and exporters of Quebec, I could provide many more positive responses from entrepreneurs who are at the root of our economy and innovation.
And I can certainly attest that those items are landing well, and people and businesses in my riding are excited to see these efforts move forward, and look forward to seeing the budget passed for sure. Switching gears slightly, as we were focusing on Canada Post and the streamlining of the rate setting process, can you speak to what the impact of these changes is expected to be or expected to have on Canada Post's fiscal outlook?
Certainly.
Certainly, it will allow Canada Post to have more predictability in its revenue and to keep up with inflation and delivery costs on a more timely basis than in the past. That's why it was a request. And when you read the Kaplan report, it's clear that the process that existed before the changes we're proposing didn't allow Canada Post to have that predictability to keep up with its comparable companies around the country, around the world.
Mr. Chair, can I correct the record?
Briefly, sure. What's up?
Just something that Ms. Sudd said at the beginning. She said that I was talking about Canada Post when I was actually only talking about red tape reduction. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks. Minister, keeping in mind that comment, I don't know if you want to change anything. Your response may be due in a writing. We're going to suspend in a moment, but before I do, I've got a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. Will PSPC post any justifications regarding the use of sandbox decisions? Make that public?
Ma compréhension, c'est que dans le processus
To my
qui est
understanding, in the process that's set out in the law, there's a mechanism to report with Treasury Board. So I'm not sure I've understood your question exactly, but my understanding is that yes, there are reports.
Acting the power, making use of the power given cabinet members to make these decisions under C-15, will those justifications for like in the public interest, will they be made public?
Oui.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Would you consider or would you recommend a sunset clause for these provisions so that we can see perhaps in a year how they're working out rather than just giving permanent powers to cabinet?
C'est une suggestion.
It's a suggestion. I'm not ready to commit the government on that right now, but I hear your suggestion, Mr. McCauley.
About need to bypass some of the regulatory framework we have, like enacting the power, making use of the powers from the C-15. Like, why not just fix the regulatory framework? Like, why do we need these powers to bypass the regulatory framework instead of just fixing the framework?
Mais il peut arriver que dans un usage spécifique, dans une
Sometimes, in a specific case for a specific industry, a specific innovation, the regulatory framework doesn't fit. You know, you've been a parliamentarian for a long time.
It doesn't fit because we've heard consultants, we've heard business, we've heard analysts, we've heard everyone talk about the issues around our regulatory system in Canada, how nothing can get built, all the red tape. Why aren't we just fixing that as well? And I understand sometimes the need to bypass, but why aren't we tackling that?
Vous avez tout à fait raison qu'il faut réduire
You're quite correct. We need to reduce red tape overall and have a regulatory framework that protects Canadians, of course, but also that fosters innovation. And I think we can do both. It doesn't reduce the need or the importance of having that type of regulatory sandbox, just like many other countries have them to foster innovation, to do things much more quickly than a regulatory change would permit.
What metrics are going to be used for, I guess you talked about Buy Canadian, about selection of Buy Canadian, and what metrics are going to use to determine if we're succeeding?
Oui, d'abord, merci de rappeler cette annonce.
Thank you for reminding us of that announcement. It's clear to us that the way we will evaluate the success of our Buy Canadian policy is seeing an increase in Canadian content, Canadian companies obtaining contracts. Now, the issue we had was that there isn't necessarily much visibility for Canadian content. There could be a Canadian supplier, but the content isn't Canadian. So that's what we're changing with the Buy Canadian policy. It's not just a supplier that has an address here in the country. We need to see that the content is made here so that the benefits will be much more visible and will be considered when we grant contracts. So that's what's a big change in the big Buy Canadian policy.
Perhaps to this committee or to the public. The reason I ask, we've looking at for years the issue around Indigenous procurement, and we'd send order of paper questions, and PSBC was response, well, we track it on an Excel spreadsheet. We really don't have that information. How are we going to see if we're actually succeeding in this program? As opposed to it just being more talking points.
Si jamais ma sous-ministre, je sais qu'elle
My deputy minister thinks a lot about these issues. And one of the issues we're facing is that visibility wasn't always there with Canadian content in procurement in the past. That will no longer be the case in the future. We'll have that visibility because now that is part of the criteria since December 16th.
We're looking at it from many different lenses, including the KPIs, including what we're going to do to be able to have compliance and measurement around it. As the minister indicated, it's about the Canadian supply chain, about what manufactured here, what professional services are done here. So it's really being able to look and unpack it, the supply chain, and to be able to put some key performance indicators and measures against it. So we're ramping up on the policy and trying to build the framework concurrently.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to some success with that. Being on this committee for years, I recall one study where a very famous comment came from your department, which was about how Canadian IT companies could not get any government contracts. And the answer was, well, no one ever gets fired in the government for hiring IBM, and thus we don't give it to Canadian businesses. And I look forward to actually seeing a change and some success in that area. Anyways, thank you again for being with us. Ms. Reza, Mr. Irachi, it's wonderful to have you with us. We're going to suspend for 5 minutes. We'll try to fix Mr. Lazon, and then we'll welcome our new guests. We're suspended. thank you, everyone, for your patience. We welcome second part, or actually first part of our study on the planning of the Defense Investment Agency pursuant to Standing Order 1083C. We welcome Mr. Fuhrer and Mr. Guzman. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us today. We understand you have an opening statement for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much,
go
Chair.
ahead.
Make sure I'm turned on here. Bonjour à tous. Merci de
Good
m'avoir
afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today.
today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm pleased to appear before you today to discuss the Defense Investment Agency. As Secretary of State for Defense Procurement, my primary responsibility is to make sure that the government provides the Canadian Armed Forces with the tools and equipment they need to defend Canada and Canadians. For too long, defense procurement in Canada has been too slow, overly complicated, and fragmented across several departments. To address these shortcomings, the government is changing its approach. This work builds directly on the recommendations of the National Defence Committee's 2024 report, A Time for Change for Reforming Defence Procurement in Canada. That's why we created the Defence Investment Agency to bring coherence, speed, and accountability to the system. The DIA is making procurements faster and more efficient. We are prioritizing Canadian industry so that, whenever possible, we are buying here at home and strengthening Canada's industrial capacity. When urgent or operational needs require us to look abroad, we will work with trusted partners to secure the intellectual property needed for Canadian companies and workers to sustain that equipment here at home. Canada has world-class capability and capacity in aerospace, shipbuilding, land systems, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. Leveraging Canadian expertise to build out our military will grow our economy while delivering capabilities to our armed forces in a tangibly quicker way. Presently, the government is working towards meeting our NATO 2% of GDP defense spending this fiscal year, 5 years ahead of schedule. We're also exploring opportunities to pull future procurements forward to ensure we're on a path to meeting NATO's 5% defense investment pledge by 2035. The Defense Investment Agency is ramping up its operations and is already focused on a number of high-priority procurements. Several major procurements have already been transferred to the agency, and more will follow as the organization expands. With a number of these projects, we have taken important steps to streamline their delivery and create opportunities for Canadian industry. With the Enhanced Satellite Communications Project Polar, we announced a strategic partnerships between Telesat and MDA, two Canadian companies with expertise delivering satellite communications and space-based infrastructure, to deliver this project faster and stimulate our economy in the process. Meanwhile, we streamlined the award of the contract to purchase 6 Global 6500s to Bombardier to replace our aging Challenger fleet, and set the Canadian Patrol Submarine project on a path to deliver years earlier than otherwise anticipated. Within the agency, CEO Doug Guzman is now responsible for building the agency and leading the DIA. His experience in capital allocation, project execution, and major financial operations is essential as we accelerate procurement and grow our defense industrial base. As a first step, we've established the DIA as a special operating agency within the Public Service and Procurement Canada to benefit from the department's expertise and long-standing relationship with industry. This transitional structure is allowing us to stand up the agency quickly while bringing together the full complement of the personnel and capabilities from Public Service and Procurement, National Defence, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Canadian Coast Guard, and Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada. The integrated experts report to the agency's CEO, who works with the Deputy Minister of PSPC. Together, they support me as the Secretary of State responsible for this new organization. To meet the moment, we are making defense procurement faster and more efficient so our armed forces and Coast Guard get what they need when they need it, while helping drive innovation and economic growth for Canada's new reality. I'm happy to take any questions you may have for me today. Thank you and merci.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Kibble. Mr. Kibble, welcome to OGGO. I understand you're joining us from the Defense Committee today. Welcome. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for the opening statement. My first question is for Mr. Guzman. Let's just cut to the chase. What defense experience do you have?
Well, you'd have to ask others why I was picked for the job. I've got relevant experience in a number of fields. I've led large complex organizations. I've advised
Just specific for
corporations.
I've seen your resume and your acumen, and but my question is specific to defense related.
I've had less defense experience than I have on a lot of other relevant areas to the job.
Fair. Do you have any defense experience or any military experience?
I don't have military experience, no.
And have you worked with defense related companies?
I have advised defense related companies.
You have advised
Yes,
defense related companies. Okay. Just looking to explore the expertise in that area, so thank you. Were you consulted on the creation of the defense investment strategy that's scheduled to be announced tomorrow?
Yes, I was, very much so.
You provided input. I won't ask further questions. We'll wait for that for tomorrow. According to an order paper question response that I received on the 12th of November, the Defense Investment Agency bureaucracy that's been created has 34 full-time employees. Are there any updates to this number since November 12th?
The number's 85 today.
So we're at 85, and Mr. Fear mentioned a full complement. What is the full complement of the Defense Investment Agency?
The full complement is likely in the 400 range.
So we're working towards...
And that's some distance down the road.
Fair. Thank you for those numbers. I appreciate that. And it mentioned that some of those employees have been pulled from Public Works. I believe the number is approximately 30. Can you expand on that?
I don't have the exact split, but we've formed the agency with employees, experts from PSPC, ISED, and DND, and we would intend to supplement that over time with external expertise, since the assignment is to innovate on the procurement side. For the moment, I'm the only outside employee to date. The rest of it has been a transfer of existing employees from the government.
Okay, so that's taken away then from the full complement of those other departments if you're cannibalizing from them.
Yeah, I don't know what the other departments have done in terms of headcount, but there's been no incremental headcount in creating the DND or the DIA other than me.
Other than yourself, right. So there's been a loss then in the other departments as they've gone to your DIA.
ADM Hardy,
Sure.
You look like you're dying. To
Yeah, so what we did is we transferred people plus their procurements. So there's no loss. There's been a transfer of files.
Transfer, yeah. But there's been a loss in
capacity
in
because
capacity
people
in
went
that
with their
department.
files.
Those people are no
Thank
longer
you.
there. Okay, according to that same order paper question, your department has no quality control officers, no cost analysis, no risk management advisors. Are these specialist services still going to be provided by PSPC?
Many of those central functions are being provided by PSPC to the agency, and over time the intention will be to build them in the agency as the agency scales.
So right now, those services will be provided by PSPC,
Correct.
and eventually you'll be taking that over.
Correct.
So it'll be transferring from one. It sounds a bit complicated, but I understand we're working up to 400. So what is your role then going to be in the procurement process? Because we have PSPC also doing it. Are you taking over completely from them?
We are. So the groups of projects that we have custody of we will have complete control on them. The procurement activities on those projects will be executed by employees of the DIA, not by employees of PSPC. And the intent of the design, as I'm sure you're aware, is to bring the expertise together in one place so that we can arm the CAF at a faster, more effective rate.
Thank you. Your department was created to, quote, cut red tape, but we're going to have some people in PSPC doing the same thing that people in DIA will be doing. So what red tape specifically are you going to be cutting?
Be people doing the same thing because the projects are either in the DIA or in PSPC from a procurement perspective, and therefore only one group of people is.
But you still have to have two groups of people, some doing projects in one section and one doing it. So you're doubling the bureaucracy, keeping some people to do, say, quality control in one department, and then.
Well, I wouldn't say we're doubling it all because we haven't added headcount. We've split the complement in order to bring a responsive, rapid approach to procurement.
According to a separate order paper question.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It's important what is being said. I congratulate the interpreters, but they can't speak twice at a time when you're speaking over each other. So please slow down, give them the opportunity, and don't speak at the same time.
Thanks. We haven't had any commentary from them, but it's always a wise thing to remember. But we are good so far, but we had stopped your time, Mr. Kibble. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and I will try to keep it a little slower. According to the separate order paper, as I started as of October 20th, the DIA is handling 8 projects, including over-the-horizon radar, but it doesn't say it's doing the polar over-the-horizon radar, a separate system. So who will be handling that? Will that be DIA?
Time, yes.
In time, okay. Fair enough. So far, you've not disclosed your public investments. Given your position and the decision-making power associated with that, I feel Canadians deserve transparency, and we're expecting a conflict of interest disclosure from yourself. Will you commit to disclosing that, perhaps submitting to this committee?
Yeah, of course. I'm fully compliant with the process. I had 60 days to make my disclosures to the ethics team. I did that in 12 days. And I've had feedback from them, and we're wrapping up the process. I have until
so you have disclosed. Thank you.
Until mid-March to complete.
Thank you.
The
And I have one last quick question for Secretary Fuhr. You appeared before National Defence Committee October 23rd and testified that you report directly to the Prime Minister. Yet, according to documents circulated to this committee, you were meant to be accountable to the Minister of Government Transformation, Public Works, and Procurement. So, which would it be?
Well, I certainly have his delegated authority. Politically, I'm accountable to the Prime Minister. I have a mandate letter from the Prime Minister.
So you report to the Prime Minister, or do you report to Minister of Government Transformation, Public Works,
I report to the Prime Minister. I have delegated authority, which I'm sure you're familiar with, having been in the military, from the Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada.
Okay, that sounds confusing, but fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Mr. Gasparo, please.
Great. Minister, Mr. Guzman, thanks for being here. As a recovering investment banker, it's very nice to see you, Mr. Guzman, being brought on board. Can you tell this committee a little bit about your background, please?
Sure. So I've worked in finance my entire career, more than half of that as an investment banker. The last 10 years overseeing wealth and investment businesses. Worked at 2 places, Goldman Sachs, an American financial institution, and Royal Bank of Canada. And as I started explaining in a prior question, a lot of what I've done in my past is useful in terms of the role I play here, managing large complex organizations, managing complex transactions, sitting across the table or beside governments and corporates, which I've done my entire career, providing advice in relation to structuring transactions. And having just led business, as I said, on the executive committee of the Royal Bank, and that's a large complex institution that needs to do things differently as it advances its business, and that's clearly one of the mandates of this team, is to do things differently in pursuit of arming the CAF in a more effective way.
Well, it's very impressive, and I'm glad our government is taking a page out of CD Howe's playbook. Just to pivot, and it's for either of you to answer. I am relieved that our government is bringing our defense procurement in line with our allies. How will the Defense Investment Agency help support collaboration with our allies, such as France, the UK, Germany, Australia, etc.? So either of you, it's fine.
Well, thanks for the question. I'm sure there was always collaboration. I'm just kind of back on the scene after being away for 6 years. We're speaking to them all the time. We're kind of last, my assessment of where we're at in terms of the DIA, we're kind of last to the party with standing up an agency that is purely focused on defense procurement. We just came back from South Korea. They have an organization called DAPA. It's a little bit more sophisticated than what we're doing. So, everyone's got their own kind of take on what it looks like. But one thing that has been completely clear is that decentralized defense procurement is just too slow, and it won't meet the moment. And, we've been decentralized for more than half a century. I think it was the late 60s is when they let the toothpaste out of the tube, and they just couldn't get it back in. And I know why they couldn't get it back in, because it was really difficult to do. We're a special operating agency right now. So are the other 2 agencies, Build Canada Homes and Major Projects. The reason that is because these can be set up very, very quickly, and they can lean back on the departments around it for resources. This agency will be different in 8-12 months. 80% of our stuff is delivering procurements. I'm whether these are exact numbers or not, but a portion of our time, 20% of our time, is building out what this agency will look like when it stands by itself in the future, and it will stand by itself in the future. You know, what that looks like. Do we need to amend the Defense Production Act? Whether legislative changes do we need to enable the agency to be on its own and independent? And that is the ultimate goal. But the quickest way to start moving was the SOA. I can't remember if it's major projects or Build Canada Homes. They've already announced they're going to become a Crown corporation as an example. I don't know what our future looks like because there's a number of options. We're going to be discussing that over the next coming months. But in the meantime, given how fast we have to move and how quickly we need to stimulate our economy and how fast we have to arm and re-equip our Canadian Armed Forces, solely focused on this, even as an SOA, is delivering results already. I mean, we've announced Challenger replacement, so Global 6500. We've got a strategic partnership with MDA Telesat for mill-grade SATCOM for the Canadian Armed Forces. We've set the Canadian Patrol Submarine project on a path that's going to deliver submarines years earlier than otherwise would have happened. And we've got a couple new announcements coming. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but in the next couple weeks, we'll be announcing some really exciting things for the Army. So even as an SOA, we're delivering quickly, which is what, one of our mandates. We need to also involve small to medium-sized enterprises, more Canadian content, working with allies that want to work with us. I'm sure I don't want to take away all your questions here, but this is an exciting opportunity, and I think we're off to a great start.
Great. That sounds impressive, Minister. The Defense Investment Agency is going to facilitate our participation in SAFE, Security Action for Europe. Can you tell us what this means for Canadian suppliers and our defense industry more broadly?
Yeah, sure I can. Essentially, this all started with a trip that I was on with the PM and the Minister of National Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to Europe. I think it was back in June, where we signed a Canada-EU Defense and Security Agreement. The second tranche underneath that was to sign the SAFE Agreement, which we've done. And what that gives Canada is access to $240 billion in Canadian dollars worth of European procurement that we otherwise wouldn't have been involved in. Interestingly, Canada is the only non-U.S. country involved in this right now. I know others wanted to, and I think you might have read something in the paper about the Brits. It didn't work out. I don't know the story behind that, but Canada did. So this is, in addition to bringing our SMEs and our companies into our own procurement, we've now enabled them to get into other supply chains. Whether it's through SAFE or other bilats that we have. Again, when I went to South Korea, I just got back, feeling a little jet-lagged. We took a trade delegation of 24 companies with us that had access to talking to a bunch of South Korean companies on how they could help deliver Canadian Patrol Submarine, how they could help support Canadian Patrol Submarine.
Thanks. We'll go to Madame Gaudreau, please, for 6.
Ça va être en français.
I'll be speaking French. We have the 2 official languages. Perhaps you know French well. Contrary to my colleague, Mr. Chair, I'm not reassured. I'll explain. I'm an entrepreneur. When I negotiate, when I put things in place, it's with my money. Now, currently, we're being told about an agency with public money, and my role is to have oversight over what is done elsewhere as well. I thought of France. For 60 years, they've had a policy framework that's structured and planned. And now we say we need to act fast, go, go, go. Yes, things are approved. I've hired, there are 85 employees, and we're told the law will come later, but we'll act first. Clarifying expenses and operational expenses. What about accountability? Standard accounting. We want to know. I know you're planning. And the trajectory. Something we can follow. I say this because, Mr. Chair, I'm also on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Veterans, they look at the agency develop and they tell me, starting by ensuring a transition service to accompany us, because tomorrow morning they won't be ensuring this service. So could you please reassure me about what's coming up in the next quarter?
Okay. Let me just circle back on something you said about transparent accountability. Obviously, those are very important things. We're going to, and they always have been. We've been spending taxpayers' money on things for years, and Canadians and taxpayers want good value for their money. And I think they deserve that, and we're going to really focus on that in a way probably that's more tangible than has been in the past. And the reason I say that is if you go back to that 2024 report from NDDN, that largely informed how this agency was stood up, the recommendations in that report were unanimous. All parties agreed to them. In addition to that, there's a supplement from the Conservatives that said they wanted a single point of accountability. Under our legacy system, we didn't have it. We had 4 agencies that all had major roles, but no single one of those agencies was accountable. So if you're talking about an increase in accountability, whether DIA is under PSBC as an SOA or when it stands up on its own, it will have a single point accountability, which in this case right now, I hold the position as me, but there'll be others in the future. But the Secretary of State for the agency is politically accountable to this committee, to the House of Commons, to the voters. And we didn't really have that before. So I think we're going to have accountability that we really haven't seen before. So I think that's an improvement. With regard to all the other expert elements of how we keep procurements from coming off the rails or making sure that the process has integrity. Right now, we still have all the resources of PSPC because we're still housed under them. And as Mr. Guzman said, as we build out on our own, we'll either bring some of that with us or we'll get it from some other place. Wherever we need to get it from, we'll have it. So we will always have that expertise in-house to make sure that the process has integrity, and now we have a single point of accountability at the top, which we haven't had in 60 years. So I think we're in a better place than we were at before.
I have a last question, Mr. Chair. I hear that we have expertise here. There's no loss that people are being brought to better performance. Did I understand correctly in the opening remarks that there's external expertise to come? Did I hear that?
Merci pour ta question.
Thank you for the question. It's been a number of years I haven't had the opportunity to speak French. You can speak French more with Mr. Carney. I'm more comfortable in English. I'll answer in English.
Room for external expertise to come into the picture. There are no shortage of large corporations out there that have complex procurement exercises. The assignment we've received is to have a look at the process that we've got today. I think everyone is unanimous that it could be improved. And so a small number of folks from the outside who got experience to come and improve the process, I think would make good sense. My focus to date has been to get the internal hires right because, as has been pointed out by some of your colleagues, I have strengths in some areas and I have weaknesses in others, and so I've sought to buttress the defense and procurement and government machinery areas that I have less experience with top quality people from PSPC and elsewhere, and we're fortunate to be able to borrow ADM Hardy in that respect. But I do think there's room for outside folks who can either tell us how commercial entities run it differently. I've had interest from Canadians in all kinds of different places, people in multinationals who have procurement expertise. So I do think we can bring something to the mix that way.
En terminant, Monsieur le Président,
to conclude, Mr. Chair, once again, I'm not reassured because every time the federal government, it's not like this in Quebec, the federal government wants to seek external assistance and it piles up. I've been here for 6 years. Every time there have been external contracts, it's been another scandal. So allow me to hope that all of the expertise is internal and the focus will be on internal people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Block for 5.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome here, Mr. Fuhr and Mr. Guzman and Ms. Hardy. It's good to have you here. We've been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time. I hope that you have healed completely from, I'm thinking it was surgery.
I asked if I should bring a doctor's note. It was a detached retina.
Okay.
And it did happen, because there was some skepticism. I could
No, well, I
send the
hope you've
photos.
completely healed from that. So in response to my colleague's question about your experience, I think you mentioned that we should ask others about why you were chosen. And in fact, we did that last fall in committee. We had members from PCO, from the Office of the Privy Council, here to answer some of our questions, and they weren't really forthcoming as to how it was that you were chosen. We do know that it was a recommendation by the Prime Minister through an order in Council. However, they were reluctant to tell us about the ideas that they had on a list of people that might be good for this position. And so I guess my question for you would be, did you express interest in this opportunity, or were you tapped on the shoulder to consider coming over to the DIA?
I expressed interest in serving Canada. And I expressed that to the Prime Minister, who's a former colleague in banking. And that discussion was then moved to PCO. I don't know who else they considered for the role. I didn't seek this specific role. I asked the government through PCO, where can I help? Where does my expertise fit? And we landed on this role.
Thank you. So given that you are a former colleague and I'm assuming a friend of the Prime Minister, it's really important that Canadians know and can be assured that a friendship won't be used to potentially subvert our ethics requirements. Are you currently subject to any conflict of interest screens similar to those that the Prime Minister is subject to?
I expect to be subject to a conflict of interest screen. Yes, I'm just working it through with the ethics folks.
Okay. So your report has still not been published from the Ethics Commissioner, yet you have been, I'm assuming, making decisions as the CEO of the Defence Investment Agency already?
As I said, I'm ahead of the process in terms of the deadlines. Fully disclosed everything. The blind trust that I've been asked to set up is being set up as we speak.
Right.
The accounts are being moved into them.
But while that is happening, I'm sorry, while that is happening, you have been making
my
decisions?
job responsibilities,
Okay.
and I've been complying with the ethics process as it's laid out.
So the Defence Investments Agency's first contract that it awarded was for military satellite technologies in the Arctic, a project that could be worth up to $5 billion. Now, just weeks ago, news broke that Telesat, one of the companies you awarded this contract to, is now being sued for fraud by creditors. What due diligence was or was not undertaken in awarding a contract of this value?
I wasn't part of the due diligence process. I can confirm that what you described actually happened. We did award a strategic partnership with Telesat MDA to provide mill-grade SATCOM to the Canadian Armed Forces. I don't have a comment. I might be able to pass it to Siobhan to comment on it, on the specifics of your question.
So a strategic partnership that we awarded, and so this is still a work in progress in terms of progressing through all the steps, but we do our due diligence. I would just point out that this is still not determined, so there's still a process that this has to go through as well in terms of the accusations, and so we have done our due diligence. Thank you.
So perhaps what I will ask then is, do you not check a company's standing with creditors ahead of awarding multi-billion-dollar contracts? I would also ask, if Telesat is unable to pay for debt they owe, how do you expect them to fulfill their contractual obligations to this project? So this is a lawsuit that is alleging Telesat has billions of dollars of loans that are maturing. What is the contingency should this actually come to fruition?
Thanks for your question. So all the due diligence will continue, and we will work with our clients to determine a contingency. Thank you.
Ms. Rochford.
It's Mrs. Suds.
Ms. Suds.
I'll go. Thank you very much, Chair. And Thank you, Secretary of State Furr, Mr. Guzman, and Ms. Hardy for being with us today. I have to say, here in Ottawa, I'm an Ottawa Member of Parliament, there's been a tremendous amount of excitement in the industry and in constituents who work in the defense sector about the investments that our government is making and about the establishment of the Defense Investment Agency. And it's been fascinating to watch. Particularly, what's been fascinating to me is the dual-use technologies and the companies that are really stepping up and interested in working with our government. We referenced a few of the early wins, so to speak, or the early partnerships and contracts that the DIA has engaged in, including, of course, MDA Space, who has presence in my riding, and Telsat here in Ottawa. But I'm wondering if you can speak to how it is that the DIA will be able to engage and support particularly SMEs in the sector to get more Canadian content and to be able to grow the industrial base here in Canada.
Thank you for the question. The first part, I got elected months, as you did, before the DIE was stood up, so I spent a good part of my time just traveling around the country and talking to SMEs and OEMs and, the business community at large. And I heard a lot of and I used to run a small business at one point in this space, so I understand it. I speak the language, and I heard a lot of different things. From an SME perspective, an overwhelming message is that they just felt unheard and they weren't sure how to get involved. They don't have big lobbyers that know how Ottawa works. They either can't afford it or they just don't understand the system, or they're more confident in landing a commercial opportunity than trying to beat down the door of a government procurement just because it's just too technically complicated, so they just gave up. So the fact that we were just showing up and talking to them was a big first step, and listening to their position in this whole thing. Money was one. They don't have access to certain financing tools that other big companies have, and there's been some things put in place since then, and there'll be more to come. A couple that I can think of right now is the regional development agencies got money that goes right across the country, so specifically there to help SMEs in this space. That's relatively new. Business BDC got $1 billion to help companies in this space, and they've helped lots of entrepreneurs. I think they helped 103,000 entrepreneurs in 2024. So they know what they're doing. So there's other financial mechanisms coming. Mr. Guzman may want to speak to that. But money has been an issue. So access to capital is now there. Communications up. We're announcing the defense industrial strategy very, very soon. So soon that probably you'll hear about it before the next few days. And that will really be the map to how we bring SMEs into the ecospace better. The other thing that I'm doing, or we're doing too, through this engagement, is we're putting a lot of pressure on our OEMs and original equipment manufacturer. I'll give you an example. Bombardier is an OEM. De Havilland's an OEM. MDA is an OEM, and we're making it very, very clear to these OEMs that we want them to review their supply chains and make sure that they're, in their little eco space of where they operate, that they're looking for SMEs that can help them and bringing the smaller businesses into their tent. And it's in their best interest to do this, because when we start to compete for things, or we've got an RFP out, these are points-based things, and Canadian content will be an assessed factor, right? So the more Canadian content you can provide, the more points you get. I mean, there's all sorts of factors, but obviously we really care. Like, it's not called the Defense Investment Agency for no reason, right? We're investing in ourselves as we, build out our Canadian Armed Forces, because they need capability, and we're going to do that faster. But we're going to leverage this massive spend and to stimulate our own economy. It's one of the 3 pillars of how we're going to do this: build Canada homes, major projects, and defense investment. So that means that we have to reach these SMEs. And some of the ways I just discussed, access to capital, access to us, and the defense industrial strategy, which will be released very soon, is part of the path to getting that done.
You mentioned access to us.
Sorry, that's our time.
Oh, I thought I had another moment.
No, 5 minutes. Madam Gaudreau, please.
Mais en fait, j'ai simplement deux questions.
Well, I have two questions, Mr. Chair. Buy Canadian? Yes, of course. Every organization has policies for buying local. But you know, the Bloc Québécois is in Quebec. For 6 years, my role has been oversight. And I think it's very relevant because every time we hear what's happening in Canada and expertise and the innovation of Quebec are minimized. I hope it's not on purpose, but I've heard Bombardier. Bombardier has been said, it's set aside, but there's more. Do you know? Have you seen the Caisse de dépôt Investment Quebec? What are your contacts and your relationships to date with G Capital, with what can help startups and businesses in Quebec?
Sure. Merci.
Thank you.
So Quebec has a thriving aviation business. It has a world leader in training and simulation in CAE. It has companies like Aero DevTech. It has Bombardier, obviously, as you note. The process...
I got to throw Davy on that list.
Davy. You know, the process that we've started to implement in submarines is a good example, where foreign suppliers understand clearly that they need to get points by putting Canadian companies' products on the platform. That has worked, and I won't take credit for it because that decision was made before I got here. That process has worked incredibly well, and the German and Norwegian partnership, as well as the Korean group, have been crisscrossing Canada, including Quebec, to look for partners to improve the likelihood of their bid. In terms of the financial players that you mentioned, I'm very familiar with those organizations. I think down the road, there's probably a place for us to play make a contribution to government. At the moment, we're not looking for financing to buy these platforms. Our colleagues in finance worry about how we're going to finance the platforms. I do think there's an opportunity longer run, which is probably beyond the scope of an early meeting in the DIA like this, where the government can play on the investing side with partners like that, some of whom are sovereign wealth funds. The case would be a form of that. And I think there's a big opportunity internationally, as we've seen large countries show a willingness to invest in Canada.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
Merci à vous.
Mrs. Jansen, please.
Thank you. I'm going to direct my questions to Mr. Guzman. As the grandma of two amazing cadets, I would say that Canadians care first and foremost about whether their sons and daughters in uniform are going to get the right gear on time and at a good price for taxpayers. So that's what defense procurement is supposed to do, correct?
Yes, that's the primary purpose, is to arm the CAF.
Excellent. So you didn't come here from the military. You came from banking and investment, moving capital around, growing portfolios, not moving tanks around. And I understand that you and the Prime Minister were colleagues at Goldman Sachs, an American company in the 90s, and you run in all the same banking and investment circles, correct?
Well, to refer to a question earlier, if I'm a close friend of the Prime Minister's, I feel bad for the Prime Minister because I don't see him very often.
Okay. So it seems from earlier testimony, as my colleague mentioned in November, that your name may not have been on the Privy Council's suggested list of candidates for the job. So, Canadians are wondering, how did you get on being the government's pick for this leading agency?
So they would know better than I would. Just as I said, I expressed an interest in serving Canada. I think Canada's having a moment.
With the Prime
globally.
Minister, correct?
I expressed to the clerk after the Prime Minister sent me there, and left to them where they thought I could best make a contribution.
Now, on that note, was there any consideration to take a lower salary rather than end up being one of the highest paid Crown CEOs with a salary possibly higher than the Prime Minister's?
I didn't negotiate the salary. I was presented with a proposal to join at a level.
You didn't negotiate?
I was benchmarked against, as I understand it, a grid of Crown Corporation CEOs.
So now, interestingly, the name of the organization that you lead is the Defense Investment Agency. Now, investment tends to mean making money and not buying equipment that works for soldiers. It sounds less like equipping soldiers and more like structuring a portfolio. So I want to make this a little bit more concrete. If there's a piece of equipment that's the best in the world, available right away, and safest for our soldiers, but it doesn't help build domestic industry, would it make it less attractive under your new model?
I think I can connect a couple of your questions. The DND and the CAF play a very, very important role in all of these projects. And the requirement setting is done by DND. So to the extent that DND has a view that 2 or 3 choices are adequate to serve the CAF and to protect the CAF, then they would articulate that. And only at that point would they need to be accepting of more than one solution if we can bring these other considerations onto the table. So
Okay,
they'll have the last say on requirements.
Thank you. So Minister, after Minister told Canadians that the old system took too long, cost too much, and we know that's real, but if your primary lens is investment returns and building market outcomes rather than getting the best equipment for our troops fast, then I feel we face a risk. So my question is, are defense dollars at risk of being spent for market outcomes and not for giving our troops the right gear at the right time?
Well, I think the word investment is
misnomer?
is confusing people a bit. So it is taking the spend, which is going up dramatically, in pursuit of arming the CAF properly, as you point out, and it is using that funds to, in addition, create growth, therefore investing in the country. It is not, we do not have a pool of capital that we invest as an investor.
I have another question. Were you in charge when the Telesat contract was awarded? Okay, well, lucky for you then. Thank you. I have 1 minute left. Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, there you go. Can I have this sheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are
A few more questions. Have you divested any assets that you owned in the process of complying with the ethics law?
Have I divested assets? I have sold some assets that didn't fit the blind trust structure that the ethics.
And may I ask what they were?
There were no single stocks. They were funds.
Your biography shows that you worked for the RBC, where you led the bank's wealth management, which includes asset management. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so do you have any financial stake, including but not limited to stock options, at RBC Global Asset Management?
There are no equities or stock options in RBC Global Asset Management. They're all at the parent company. I have deferred compensation, which has been disclosed in the process, and I have stock options, which have been disclosed in the process, and which will be part of the blind trust.
Okay, so the stock price has since doubled, and the Defense Investment Agency has given them like a $750 million purchase order as of December, correct?
I'm unaware of the Royal Bank getting a purchase order for $750 million.
The stock price of the RBC Global Asset Management.
There is no stock price for asset management. There's a stock price for the parent bank.
Okay.
But I don't know the order to which you're referring. I don't know what order you're referring to.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Président. Thank you very much. And I come from a community that's very proud to be home to Wing 22, a Canadian Forces base. And I must say, in my community, I'd just like to echo what my colleague mentioned about the pride. There's I find a lot of positive reaction to the government's general defense policy, to both your appointments, and to the launch of the Defense Investment Agency. And so that's what I'm hearing from the citizens in my riding very much. And last week, I must say, Secretary Fure, I enjoyed watching you on Secretary of State Fure. Sorry about that. I enjoyed watching you on TV, going in and out of submarines, and I thought that was very good. And I watched all of the coverage. And so I was impressed as well. I understand that we're now down to 2 countries in a very short amount of time. So it seems to me like an efficient process. So I was wondering if you might touch on that. And if you might touch as well, when you describe the process, I almost get a sense that it's like a continual improvement process that you're engaged in, that you will learn as we go along and as we develop processes. And so wondering if already there's been some lessons learned from our involvement with submarines and or other acquisitions that we've made. So the first question, yes.
Okay, thank you for the question. And it was an unbelievable experience, especially bringing all those companies over with us because they could just sense opportunity over there. South Korea is a natural partner for us. They're like-minded. We can work with them, and there's lots of opportunity there. Just to circle back on what you just asked, and maybe a bit about what MP Jensen just had referred to, Mr. Guzman. The primary lens for defense procurement isn't going to be investment. It's an additional lens. So we need to build out our economy in a way that we just didn't have to do a year ago. This is very important. So obviously the Canadian Armed Forces requirements are where we start, right? If they submit requirements, we're going to put another lens so to meet their needs, to do the jobs that we ask them to do, that's what they need. We're going to put another lens over top of that and say, hey, listen, if that thing exists in Canada, why would we not buy it from ourselves, give the CAF what they need while we stimulate our own economy to meet the moment because of all this tariff situation and other pressures that are on us economically. If we don't make it in Canada, can we partner with another nation that shares our values that we can work with, get our supply chains into their system, so we can not only buy, make sure that we get something that our supply chains are involved in, but we can get our supply chains into their system that they have going on, whether that be South Korea or Germany. So these are the new lenses of procurement that we have to think about. It's just adding other things that we have to think about moving forward. With regard to the sub choice, Canada doesn't make subs, right? So buy, build, partner. So we're not buying one here because we don't have one. We're not building one. We're not building one here not because we don't have the capability. We're super capable. We could build a sub here. We don't have time, and time is one of the things this agency has to solve for. So this means who are we going to partner with? This is why we ended up with the options that we have, which is Hanwha Ocean in South Korea and TKMS, which is a Norway-Germany option. We had 24 or 25 responses to a request for information on an RFI on submarines. We quickly down-selected to 2. Those 2 were primarily driven by the requirements of the Royal Canadian Navy. They said to us, listen, these 2 will satisfy our requirements. We understand there's other things at play here. So if either of these 2 subs would work for us. So we decided to run a competitive process against the 2 that met the Navy's requirements, which makes both of them very aggressive. They both want this job, and they're both putting their best foot forward in terms of bringing our companies into their supply chains, making sure that the in-service support that's going to be required to look after these subs for the next 30 years, which is 70% of the total cost of this program, that we have the IP to do it in Canada. There's a Canadian company or Canadian companies that look after this sub. So this is exactly what this agency is doing, is to make sure we get the stuff to the submarine, in this case, to the Canadian Armed Forces quickly. Like I said at the beginning, we're going to shave years off this. And anybody in this town, like the public-facing timeline on this before we got involved was contract award in 2028, subs in the water in 2035. We're going to have subs in the water by 2032, and we're probably going to announce a winner this year, right? So we can get infrastructure going. It will take years to build infrastructure. We need to get people working in this country, and there's significant infrastructure on both coasts to support these submarines. So that gives us people working and creating jobs.
Need you to wrap up. We're past our time, but wrap up, please.
Okay. So this is very, very important. And in addition to that, we haven't done a really good job in the past at making sure infrastructure is in place and ready for the equipment when it arrives. So getting this whole process rolling is very important, and that's what we're doing.
Just if am I right? And quickly, Algoma was so happy. You see the impact in communities. Thank you.
Please, we allowed him an extra 2 minutes to be kind.
Yeah. I know there's a snowstorm outside.
Everyone's so excited.
The snowstorm got to do with fix the snowstorm. We are done. Thank you for joining us. A couple quick questions, if you don't mind, for myself. Mr. Guzman, are you subject to the 1-year cooling off period that Governor and Council appointments are subject to?
On the other side, when I leave?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? I believe so.
You believe?
I believe.
You're not sure? Would you respond back to us? We asked
Sure.
PCO, and they're like,
sure.
well, ask Mr. Guzman.
Sure.
Maybe you can get back to us. Ms. Hardy,
Point of order?
Secretary
Sorry, I don't understand why we're done already.
because we're finishing at 5:30, and we're
Okay.
done our rounds.
So there's no further round?
No,
Okay.
that's correct. Could you provide to us just how much, like I know you were talking about we're going to hit 2% years ahead. How much of that is due to just reclassification of an unarmed civilian Coast Guard? And if you could get back to us, and again, no hurry, I'm looking at the PBO report just talking about reaching the 5% on the costs. And the response was, I'll read to you, they talk about from the 2 to 3.5%, talks about that's already existing spending across all levels of government. So I wonder if you could get back to us how much of that all levels of government and ancillary component expect to be met under current planned spending. So it's already existing spending, all levels of government. How much of that is actually going to be on defense equipment? Because the point is, we hear so much, and we've heard it today. Everyone's excited, we're ramping up, but we're hitting the 2% because we've reclassified, by and large, Coast Guard. And apparently, from the 2 to 3.5, it's already existing spending across all levels of government. I'm not looking for an answer right now because there's a snowstorm and you have 7 minutes left. But if you just get back to us when you have time. Thank you again for being with us today. I appreciate your time. Colleagues, quickly, before we break, our analysts are going to provide short summary of what we've heard so far regarding a recent study on the budget. They'll have that out during the break week. And we agreed then that we would put our recommendations to the other group and we're asking by the 20th. So we'll have a report out. At noon. Yeah, at noon, sorry. So the analysts will have their suggestions out of what we heard and suggestions, and then provide recommendations, and we'll try and hash it out. So by the 20th at noon, please. And we'll send out a reminder next week. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.